Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. With all of the protests and the commentary about law enforcement, our guest this morning joins us to talk about law enforcement from her perspective and hopefully help us to understand a little bit better. Her name is Captain Sonia Pruitt. She's from the Montgomery County Police Department, Laurel, in Maryland, and she joins us to talk not only about her experience being on the police force for nearly 3 decades, she also joins us to talk about the National Black Police Association. Captain Pruitt, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So take us back nearly 30 years ago when you decided that you wanted to become a police officer.
Okay. Well, it certainly wasn't because I was trying to save the world. It was actually selfishly. I was working for the Postal Service Inspection Service, and that is their law enforcement division, as a data analyst. And I just got tired of sitting behind a desk and not being able to see the sun all day long. So I said, well, let me do something where I can be around people. I can be outside. Every day is a different day. And I said, oh, a police officer. Now, my father was the police, but I wasn't really trying to follow in his footsteps either. I just wanted to do something different.
Mm-hmm. And so you become a police officer, and obviously there's something about the law and law enforcement that you have stayed for almost 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so part of my past is that I attended Howard University, where the focus is really on community and being a vanguard for underserved communities. And so as I navigated my police career, I realized that I could make an impact in those areas. And so it became even more attractive to me to stay and do those things.
And so moving forward, what are some of the challenges that you begin to see that African American police officers have that are different from their white counterparts?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, because culturally, we come from a community that has had strife over the last several decades with the police. And if you go all the way back to our ancestors arriving in America and the advent of slave patrols, you could say that our history and our intersection started then. And we've had strife since then, especially when police were a part of the KKK. Police were part of subjugating and keeping Black people oppressed. So you fast forward, and there are aspects of that type of culture that is still part of policing culture now. It is not something that we talk about. Race is not something that's comfortable for law enforcement to talk about, but it's something that we really, really need to identify and actually focus on.
And so you say it's not comfortable for law enforcement to talk about. Why?
Well, it's just like talking about race in the world in general. People are uncomfortable because it may evoke feelings of guilt, or why are you trying to hold me accountable for something that I did not do? I never owned slaves. But the reality is, as long as there is racism and not everyone is working against it, then there's going to be racism. So we have to identify it. We have to talk about it. And people need to get, listen, I don't want to minimize anyone's feelings, but I would say that people probably need to get past the guilt part to get to what's really, really crucial, which is addressing race issues, especially in policing. I mean, there is a power dynamic that is unequal. So you have the powerful police, and then you have all the communities who feel less powerful or empowered. And so we can't address that power dynamic either. People, the police, we hold on to it like this. We know this is ours, but we were not created for our own good. We were created for the overall good. And so in that way, we have to address the race issue, and we also have to address the power dynamics, which can be very dangerous when you combine them.
Very
you can
dangerous.
see Mr. George Floyd.
Right. But before we talk about George Floyd, there were so many George Floyds before George Floyd.
Yes.
And there were so many narratives that were created by law enforcement about why these people ended up dying in the custody or while being detained by police. As a law enforcement officer over these many years, how did you process these deaths that we knew about nationally, and then some that we didn't know about, and some that you knew about in your sphere? How did you process that?
It's just an extra added trauma. And I'm sure that there's many of us who are suffering from PTSD. And I say that in all seriousness.
Sure.
If you don't find ways to compartmentalize what you are experiencing, it could become an issue. With police overall having a high suicide and domestic violence and substance abuse rate. So my approach has always been, I'm going to address this head on. I would try to start conversations about it. And because of that, I think I was probably ostracized and treated differently. When you say to someone, I see this as Trayvon Martin is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear to a lot of us that he was a 16-year-old boy walking through his father's neighborhood, and he was accosted by someone, and now he's dead, but he was never given justice because the person who killed him said that Trayvon attacked him, but he was following him. So, how you process that, and Black officers process that differently because we have Black 16-year-old sons and daughters, and, we're concerned about their safety. Whereas I think there are white officers, and this is not a generalization, but there are white officers who I spoke to who saw him as a thug. They called him a thug. He was wearing a hoodie as though that meant something. And he was, he didn't take orders from George Zimmerman, who should not have to take orders from. You see, I'm getting passionate about it because he is a citizen of this country and he should have a right to walk down the street, go to the store, and walk back home and be safe. So we see things differently. We have different vantage points, but we can't seem to have conversations where there is understanding, where we reach some middle ground where there's understanding,
right,
as to why Black officers see things a certain way and as to why white officers see things a certain way. Although I would submit that just like in the world at large, Black people have to live in everyone's world where no one wants to live in ours.
Wow. Let's take a break here, but when we come back, I want to talk about George Floyd, but all of the deaths that have been seen and unseen, and where we are right now. The call for action and change. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Now, let me just start this conversation by saying, if you've ever watched this show, you know that our mission is three things: to encourage, uplift, and enlighten our listeners one conversation at a time. Our guest this morning is Police Captain Sonia Pruitt from the Montgomery County Police Department, Laurel, in Maryland. And we're talking about her vantage point, being a police officer for some nearly 30 years. What she has seen over those years, what she is seeing at the end of her career. And so we were talking about Trayvon Martin. And I think Trayvon Martin was probably one of those cases that first came to national attention. And the sad part about it, for any African-American parent, if you had a son or have a son that loves hoodies like our son does and your 16-year-olds probably do, we were really afraid that they would be labeled a thug and that they may be stopped by the police and not make it home. And we all know, if you are a person of color, we all know about the talk that you have with your kids. Tell us about the talk that you have had with your kids, because when your kids leave home, if they're stopped, they might not necessarily have a label saying my mom is a police captain.
Right. Yeah. I've had the talk multiple times with my sons as they've gotten older, because the talk has changed. And now that they are dating and about to have driver's license, and becoming more independent, and I'm not going to be with them, or their father's not going to be with them, or their grandparents, you got to tell them what you expect of them so that they can come home safely. And you notice I said what we expect of them,
right?
Not what we expect from other people, because
right.
That's an unknown factor. So I've told them that when they come into contact with police, if they have an encounter where they are stopped by the police, that it's okay to immediately say, my mother is a police captain. I want to put that out there in the space, so that officers can be on alert that you're not just dealing with kids who may not know, or their parents may not know, how the system works. And hopefully that will give them somewhat of an edge if the situation were to go south. I hate thinking that way, but it's real. I have, conversations that I've had with coworkers who don't have an understanding of how we could ever think that Trayvon was anything other than a criminal. I saw Trayvon like he could have been one of my sons.
I did too.
Okay. I will go in the store and I'm pulling hoods off their head. I'm like, you don't put your hood on in public.
Because it's not safe. It might not be safe.
Because it's not safe.
I still have this conversation with my 20-year-old right now, who in his vehicle can do what he wants, but chooses to wear his hood on his head. I just think that could be deemed as a problem.
Yes, because there's, we are labeled, Black people are labeled by the clothes we wear, how we wear our hair. This is besides the skin color.
Right.
So, we have to talk about those things so that they can be aware of why that could be an issue. Sadly.
I think that now that we are having the conversation, hopefully that will change. But I want to take you back to 14 or 15 days ago when we watched George Floyd die. We literally, I think the world literally watched that video, and we watched him die. But we've seen so many people die. And we saw Philando Castile. We literally saw the life just leave from his body. We saw Ahmaud Arbery just being gunned down. Like, you wouldn't even probably gun down a deer like that. And the list goes on and on and on. Victor White III, who is from Louisiana, New Iberia, who was handcuffed with his hands in the back and was shot. And police said that he committed suicide, that he shot himself with his handcuffs behind his back. But all of those cases just seem to have a narrative that they were thugs, or that they were doing something that was illegal, or they were breaking the law. And it just moved on. But there was something about this time and this season that is changing the world. What was that moment like for you when you saw that tape?
I'm finding it as I get older that it's difficult for me to watch those kinds of videos, and people send them to me. I don't know whether, I don't know, it's like, I guess I'm a magnet because I'm law enforcement, and I really don't want to watch them. It's a lot. It's part of, adding to the trauma. But I watched it because I knew that someone was going to ask me about it, and I needed to see for myself, and I was struck. I was struck by the lack of humanity in that space. I was struck by a man who narrated his own death.
Wow.
By saying, "I can't breathe, you're going to kill me," and calling for his mother at the end. I was struck by one of my peers who so casually had his hands in his pockets as though this was just another day. And it reminded me of those postcards where, they would lynch a Black man and then they would all stand around and take a picture for the postcard. Right. And they got the kids in the background with picnic baskets, which is where picnic came from.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Well, it's a longer narrative behind that. It's associated. So I thought about all of those things. And then I saw the Asian officer, and I was even more saddened that a person of darker skin ethnicity would not see that, I need to step in. Instead, he was like the guard.
Right.
I'm the guard this situation.
But regardless of his color, though, Captain Pruitt, I wonder why humanity didn't kick in. Why any of those officers, and there's now suggestion that one officer said, "Do you think we need to turn him over?" But is it when you're embroiled in a situation, and this didn't even appear, and I'm just talking about appearance, it didn't appear to be a high intensity takedown. And maybe there was a point where it could have been. We have not yet seen that. But what could have been? What kind of adrenaline could have been running through all of these officers' bodies and minds that they don't see what everybody there on the scene was able to see, that this man is losing life, that this is real? When I talk to my friends about it, we trying to got to talk it out so that you can let some of it go. We can't seem to come up with a good answer for that, except that there is a objectification that this man was not seen as human. And I think we're talking about race issues in policing. I think that brings about fear. The whole race piece brings about a fear. And so then you objectify the person. It makes it easier to take certain actions when you don't actually see a human. You don't see your own brother, or you don't see your own son. Right. This is somebody. This is a thug. This is, some sort of a noun or pronoun. And that's the only explanation that I can come up with. It breaks my heart to know that a police officer would not do what it takes to save a life. We're trained that even when you take deadly force, the first thing you should do after that is check to see if that person is still breathing. Because, if they are, okay, maybe we could save their life, even though, we needed to use fatal force to save our own or somebody else. So I don't know. I can't explain this situation. I think that Officer Chauvin needs to explain himself. I wonder if he will, and I wonder if he can. Don't know. Yeah. Let's take a break here, but when we come back, I want to talk about the National Black Police Association and why a National Black Police Association is necessary. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Captain Sonia Pruitt, and she joins us to just really give us a mind's eye inside of her view being in law enforcement, serving and protecting for nearly 30 years. And before we went to a break, Captain Pruitt, I was asking you about the National Black Police Association and why was it comprised and why was it needed?
Mm-hmm. So in 1972, a group of 13 Black police associations from across the country or their representatives got together and had a meeting to talk about those issues that were particularly affecting Black officers in their police departments, like a lack of promotion, not getting nice assignments, being made to walk a beat instead of having a car. This is in 72. So they decided that collectively there would be power in their voices. And so from that meeting, the National Black Police Association was born almost 48 years now.
Wow. So was that really about equality within the police departments around the country?
Yes, absolutely. And then our mission expanded to the Black community at large, because for us, that is the most underserved community in this country. So once they gathered and got their voices, together and unified, they were able to actually force change in police departments through lawsuits and, speaking out as a group. So there is value in that. And now here we are 48 years later, we still need that kind of support, but it's more about having a place that you can go where you can share your experiences and you know that there's someone there who will actually understand from a cultural standpoint. And we get the question a lot from white officers, why do you need a Black police association? Because in all honesty, groups like the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, they don't really support us in the way that we need as Black officers. And many times we're left on the fringes and on the outskirts trying to get some help in our situations that we're dealing with. So that's why we exist.
Wow. So let's talk about where we are now and what some states are saying, like Minnesota, that they want to defund the police department and they want to go in and really, I guess, root out those bad apples that have had complaints and have had problems, probably because of their own trauma and their own biases that they brought to the job.
Well, you made a really great point. We are where we are because, inside our police departments, we haven't done a good job. We haven't even done a fair job of handling these situations. Okay. And so now the public who we work for and who have a right to demand that we police the way that they see fit are saying, you know what? We want to take a look at defunding. We want to disband police departments. And, those words are good because they're short and they capture your attention. I don't think people should exactly panic, but some people are, really up, they're flustered by those words.
Yeah.
But when you
people
talk
are
about,
saying, what's that going to look like? Disbanding the police department.
Listen, I've heard some police officers say, the public will learn when we don't respond. But here's the thing. If you decide to disband the police department, such as Camden did, that's one of their claims to fame, and it was a successful endeavor. If you decide to disband, what you're really saying is we're going to reorganize. And when we reorganize, the officers who will work for our new organization will be the officers that will follow the mission as we stated. So in other words, if you can't get with the program, you ain't gonna be able to work for us.
Right.
That's what that's going to look like, probably.
Has it been in all these many years that you have seen countless wrong things? Does it surprise you that wrong things happen? People knew that wrong things and wrong narratives, and let me just say that lies were being told about why a person died. Does it surprise you that it has taken probably your 30 years to finally have the world say, no more?
I'm disappointed, but not surprised. Let's think about this civil rights movement is a good example. It was not without pressure that things were moved along in the civil rights movement. Had Dr. King, people don't really know, they know some, a couple of things about Dr. King. If you study him, he came to a realization that there was going to have to be pressure applied and that everything wasn't going to be peaceful. It doesn't mean you have to be lawless, but it does mean you're going to have to apply pressure. And I think that after we had all of the gains from the civil rights movement, we kind of let our guard down and now everything is okay. We're doing well. Officers, Black officers, making a great salary, becoming chiefs of police. And, people in our communities, are benefiting from affirmative action, although Black people were not the greatest beneficiary of affirmative action. But still, we're doing well. Mm-hmm. And now we are. And maybe we weren't doing as well as we thought. And so we have a group of young people who are taking up the banner. They're like, okay, we're not satisfied. We're not satisfied for ourselves. And we're not satisfied for our parents and our elders. And so here we are again. And this time, I think when the pressure is applied, that it's going to have to be relentless. You can't let up. Or we're just going to be reliving this history over and over again.
Right. And before I've got to let you go, one of the things that I've been talking to the police officers that we've been blessed to have on the show is, and you've touched on it a few times, the trauma, PTSD. As you leave the police force, how will you deal with that, or how have you dealt with the trauma that you have seen inside of these many years of being part of your department?
Yeah. So President Obama had a task force on 21st century policing. And from that task force came some suggestions. And one of those tenets, one of those pillars, as they call them, there were 6, was health and wellness. I take health and wellness very seriously. I'm a 2-time breast cancer survivor.
Wow. So
I understand the value of talking to someone. I got great benefits. I used mine. I have a great counselor. I don't see her as much as I used to, but she's always there if I need her. And, it makes all the difference. And you have to compartmentalize all of this. This is, policing is not the entirety of one's life. And if it is, you might want to, take a look at that. Your outside activities, your friends, your children and your family, you got to do other things so that you can keep it all in perspective. If not, it can be really, really overwhelming.
Absolutely. Captain Pruitt, thank you for taking the time, and thank you for serving your state and the citizens in your community for nearly 30 years. I look forward to talking to you after retirement and seeing what's next for you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Indeed. Captain Sonia Pruitt has been our guest this morning. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This is my final point on point today. I said our mission is and always will be to encourage, uplift, and enlighten our listeners and viewers one conversation at a time. And I think at times like this, we just have to remind you that that's what the mission is that we have every single day. And bringing in people like Captain Pruitt to get a more myopic view or a closer view of people who protect and serve and have been protecting and serving for nearly 3 decades. What are their feelings? What are their insights? What are their challenges? And I know that we are seeing so many people become a part of this movement, this demand for equality. It shouldn't even be a demand that if you are stopped by law enforcement, that you would be in a particular group that you would have to worry about whether you lived or died in that encounter, in that stop. And I think that the larger conversation is starting to happen And people who have never had that experience are starting to become more empathetic and sympathetic and say, you know what? That is not my experience. I don't know the fear, the tenseness that happens when I look up in my rearview mirror and I see a police behind me. But as people of color, we know that when we are stopped by the police, that we have to do everything in our power to make sure that we are courteous, and we should be anyway, to make sure that our kids are courteous. Almost every person of color that I know that you could talk to would say to you, if they've got teenagers that are driving, that you have some sort of conversation about what it would look like if they are stopped by the police. And to make sure that they are in full compliance, to make sure that as nervous as you are when you are stopped by the police, that the police are inherently there to help and not to harm. And I think that that cannot be lost in this conversation, that there are more good police officers than there are bad. But here's the issue. Police officers really cannot afford to have a bad day, because if they have a bad day, that could end in a catastrophic reality for a person who had no intention of doing anything but trying to follow the law. And maybe they weren't trying to follow the law. Maybe they were actually breaking the law. But even if somebody that you love breaks the law, you still want to be able to go to the police station and know that they are alive and that you work through the problem. And I think now that we are acknowledging that there are problems, we can start to do the work. And what the protests are saying, not only to America, but to the world, is that this must end and that we all have to come to the table. And one of the things that Captain Pruitt said is that it will make you angry, the inequality. And yes, there's some anger, but I think all egos have to be laid on the table. The protest hopefully will draw some of that anger out and make people really feel that they are part of change, because they are. But when the noise stops, we have to have real conversation about what equality looks like. And I think those people that have not been on the receiving end of inequality have to really listen carefully. Because after all, you can't know what you don't know. My Uncle New would say this all the time: progress instead of perfection. We're making progress. And if we all open our ears and our hearts, I believe that we're going to get better. We're going to start the healing process, and we're going to be bigger, better, and greater than ever before. And that, family, is my final point on point today.